I had always held a conviction that a true marriage rested on three unshakable pillars: trust, honesty, and unwavering loyalty. For many years, I was convinced that my wife and I possessed exactly that kind of unbreakable connection. We shared laughter, dreamed about what lay ahead, and stood shoulder to shoulder through every difficulty life threw at us. Yet, gradually, almost imperceptibly, tiny fractures started appearing in what I thought was solid ground. She began coming home later and later, always with the same ready explanations: late work dinners, evenings out with friends. At the beginning, I chose to trust her, because that's what a husband should do. I convinced myself she was simply swamped, perhaps stressed, and the last thing I wanted was to turn into the suspicious, insecure spouse who questions her every step. Even so, there was a persistent feeling deep in my stomach, a quiet warning I couldn't entirely silence. Eventually, those warning signs grew too loud to keep ignoring. She started treating her phone like it contained state secrets, smiling secretly at the screen, then instantly locking it the moment I walked into the room. Her clothes carried the faint trace of her perfume far longer than they should have after an ordinary day, and more often she headed straight to the shower the second she stepped through the door, as though she needed to scrub the entire evening off her skin. And still I repeated to myself that doubting her would be the real betrayal. That internal argument lasted until the night I finally decided to trust my instincts instead of my hopes. She announced she was meeting a friend for drinks. I parked a short distance from the bar and waited in my car. My stomach plummeted the instant I watched her step into another man's embrace and kiss him with an intensity and hunger I once believed she reserved only for me. In that single second, our entire shared history crumbled into dust. Every joyful memory, every promise, every future plan we had made suddenly felt like a deliberate, heartless deception. I drove home without turning on the radio, without speaking a word, my thoughts a violent storm of fury and grief. Two paths opened before me: storm in and confront her the moment she returned, or allow her to walk back into our house completely unaware that her secret had already been discovered. That was the moment the concept of revenge took root. Not hot-blooded vengeance, not destruction, but something far colder and more deliberate, something that would compel her to feel the full gravity of her choices. I wanted her to slip under the covers beside me, convince her double life remained perfectly hidden, only to realize I had known everything for hours. I spent the rest of the night making careful preparations. I printed every photograph I had quietly taken. Her locked in his arms, their lips pressed together, their fingers intertwined with the careless ease of people who believe no one is watching. Each image was a silent, irrefutable chapter of the secret existence she had built behind my back. I laid the pictures out meticulously across her pillow, exactly where her head would rest when she climbed into bed. Beside them I placed a brief note containing only 5 words. I know. It's over now. My fingers shook slightly as I positioned the evidence, but beneath the tremor was an unexpected stillness. The truth no longer belonged only to her. There would be no shouting match, no dramatic accusations. The photographs and those 5 words would do all the speaking that was necessary. Much later, I heard her keys slide into the lock. My pulse hammered, not from affection, but from the anticipation of what was coming. She entered softly, certain I was already sleeping. I kept my breathing slow and even, mimicking sleep as she undressed in the dark and slid beneath the sheets the way she had done countless times before. This night was nothing like the others. Her hand reached for her pillow and brushed against the stack of papers. I sensed a sudden hesitation in her movements. She lifted the photographs into the faint light coming from her phone screen. The sharp, involuntary gasp that escaped her sliced the quiet room like a blade. Her breathing turned quick and shallow as she flipped from one picture to the next, each image hammering home the reality that every lie she thought she had safely buried had been uncovered. Then she reached the note. I felt her entire body go rigid beside me, shaking beneath the crushing realization of being exposed. She breathed my name in a cracked whisper, but I remained perfectly still, eyes shut, allowed her to stew in a reverse betrayal. Her own deceit now staring straight back at her. For the first time, she was the one terrified of what tomorrow would bring. At last I opened my eyes. The expression on her face is burned into my memory forever. Eyes enormous, skin ashen, pure panic. Please, she stammered. It's not what it looks like. The oldest, most predictable line in the book. I nearly let out a bitter laugh. The evidence was literally clutched in her trembling hands. Impossible to deny. I sat up slowly, deliberately, looking directly into her eyes with a steady calm that clearly unnerved her far more than any shouting ever could have. You climbed back into our bed acting like everything was normal, I said, voice level and unhurried. But you forgot something important. I already knew. She reached toward me desperately. I moved out of reach. The distance between us had become a chasm nothing could bridge. She began to plead, tears pouring down her cheeks, promising it was all a terrible mistake, swearing she still loved me. Every sentence rang hollow, like a rehearsed speech delivered by someone who no longer believed her own lines. I spoke the simple truth she refused to accept. Love doesn't hide in shadows. Love doesn't tell lies. Love doesn't choose someone else. With each sentence, she seemed to collapse inward, crushed beneath the unbearable weight of her own actions. Her begging grew more frantic, more broken. But my decision had already been made, and it was final. Our marriage had ended. I rose from the bed, took the small suitcase I had packed earlier, and walked toward the door. She lunged after me, fingers closing around my arm, but I calmly freed myself. This house, this bed, this entire life, we created side by side. But the moment you decided he was worth more than me, you destroyed everything. Her cries echoed through the house as I stepped outside. I never once looked back. For the first time in a long time, I was not the one shattered. I was the one choosing to walk away whole, head high, dignity intact. The next morning she tried everything. Phone calls, endless text messages, even appearing at my job. I answered none of it. The photographs I left on her pillow had already said everything that needed saying. There was nothing left to add. She had slipped into our bed believing she could keep both lives forever. Instead, she found the truth waiting for her. Cold, silent, and completely unavoidable. Sometimes a plain, unadorned truth cuts deeper than any scream or blow ever could. In the end, she lost me, and I gained my freedom.